All right, we're going to go ahead and get started right at the top of the hour. Again, my name is Phillip Long. A couple of housekeeping tips before we get started. We're going to have a question and answer at the end of this presentation. So if you have questions, you can put them in the chat, and we'll be happy to answer them at the end of the presentation. As well as if things need to be taken offline, there's also going to be an email and an offer at the end that you can respond to, so that if the questions are kind of deep, we may actually want to take them offline just in respect of the other folks on the call. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The topic today is how hackers are targeting your company and what you can do as a business owner to stop them. And first, I'll just briefly introduce myself. Really, I'm a technologist, been in this industry for the past 20 years, serving businesses here on the Gulf Coast. I have hundreds of clients from Gulfport to Gulf Breeze. I currently own other businesses, so I think I really have a unique way of looking at things, because not only am I looking at it from a technology standpoint and how to make systems work, but also an entrepreneur and a business owner. As well as I'm a certified information system security professional, and I just recently passed my CMMC. I'm a registered practitioner with the CMMC organization. So continually learning. And enough about me. Let's introduce my guest. This is Rudy Messex, and he is also a CISSP. He works for SonicWall. He's 30-year veteran of the DoD. He also has done vulnerability research and penetration testing for the last 8 years in the Department of Defense, as well as he's briefed and given demonstrations to staff members of U.S. Congress, senior members of the U.S. military. He's also a certified GIAC incident responder, and he also does contributions to his hacker high school team. He's a member of ISC Squared, ISSA, as well as SOCA. So welcome, Rudy. Really glad to have you on. We got a guy on that really has a wealth of information.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep. And so I want to pop in here. I'm just always curious. I want to do a quick poll if I can find my poll. I want to see how well that you think that you can spot a cyber threat. I want to just kind of get a feel, if everybody would fill out that poll real quick. I always like to kind of get a feel for what people think, that how they feel about threats and their proficiency in being able to identify a threat. I would say for sure that people are better than they once were because of things, but got a few more coming in here. Let's see. We'll just kind of end it right there. We didn't get everybody, but we'll just look at the results real quick. And basically, 25% think that they're highly proficient, 63% proficient, and 13% not proficient. Now, I want to just kind of our talk, I want to think about this from a risk management standpoint. Whenever we look at it from a small to mid-sized business, whenever we look at our risk, and we want to look at it from what's happening in relation to the world. So just want to pop through quickly. I'm not even going to really touch on any of this that much, but just in the past few weeks, we've had the Colonial Pipeline. We've had JBS a day or two ago with their meat packing plant. We've had in Mobile County, they had a cyber attack that shut the systems down for 3 days. And the thing that's really alarming is the rate at what things are coming, and even at the level at which we're seeing these bad actors be effective, and the way that our world is set up with supply chain management, just in time kind of things. We're seeing deep impacts, with that food processor. If they would have been down a little bit longer, that could have really hurt us from an industry on buying meat. And then we saw with the gas with the Colonial Pipeline, we see everybody and their reaction is to run out to the market and buy all they can, which further exacerbates the problem. So we have a very sensitive system. Rudy, you want to weigh in on some thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would say about 3 years ago, if you attended one of my talks, one of the things that you would hear me talk about is how it's easy to be a bad guy, how it's all reward and no risk. And that was 3 years ago. And today, we're seeing the fruits of that. And that is that the guys that are attacking us now are college educated, and they're really good at their jobs, and they understand these things down to the driver level. And they're not the guys that are attacking you. They're selling those services to anybody who's willing to buy them, and they're packaging small little mobile hack kits for anybody who's willing to give them $100. And so those guys are never going to go to jail because they're just selling software. It doesn't matter what someone does with the software. The guys that are using this are attacking us from countries where there's no extradition treaty. So they have, even if we can track it down to their house and we can show, their video camera and say, this is the guy, nobody's going to go and arrest that guy. And so that's why we're seeing now the results of not being able to enforce laws across national lines. And we're also seeing some of this, if we remember back to when the CIA, we had that bad actor at the CIA that uploaded all of the CIA tools to the internet. Those tools immediately went into these hack kits. And so these kids had information at a much deeper, much better understood. And I know you're going to talk about ATP groups later, so I won't touch on that too much now. But we gave the standard, script kiddie access to stuff that normally only an APT would have. And so I will tell you, I just said to a friend of mine the other day, it's probably the worst that I've ever seen it right now. Since the big hacker crackdown in the 80s, which compared to what we have now, it was big news then. Today, it's small potatoes.
Yeah, that kind of leads us to looking at this. Came off of this is a year-over-year change from 2020 of the global cyber attacks. This is a SonicWall report that they just recently did, and we're seeing that malware attacks are down. Encrypted threats are up 4%. The intrusion attempts are up 20%. Cryptojacking and attacks like that are up 28%. Of course, ransomware, the big winner for all the bad guys, 304 million of those, and up 62%. And then the Internet of Things attacks is up 66%. Weigh in on that with me, Rudy, for a minute. This is, again, this is a SonicWall report. You may have some deeper insight on that.
Yeah, so one of the things that, and I realize I work for SonicWall, and SonicWall came up with this report, the encrypted threats I really see as being understated. And some of that goes back to my DoD days. The reason the encrypted threats doesn't show so much of a rise is we still aren't inspecting encrypted traffic coming across the network. So 70% of the firewalls that are out there today, or excuse me, not 70%, 95% of the firewalls that are out there today are not inspecting encrypted traffic, which is 70% of your internet traffic. So we're just passing that along. It's kind of like we're at the airport and TSA says, you know what, we're not going to inspect those bags, just come in. And so that, when we do inspect that encrypted traffic, I would expect to see that figure go up. So really the increase of 4% is really, this is what we're catching now. I don't think that's an increase of what's actually out there.
Sure. We're going to, I've got a slide on that a little later. I want to touch on that for sure, because I think that's something I want to dig in a little deeper, because I think that most of our listeners are not going to really, I like the analogy you used there, but we'll touch on that.
Yeah. And then obviously the ransomware is the moneymaker. That's always going to stay high until those guys start going to jail. With the Colonial Pipeline, if you follow the post news, you may know that, and it's not attributed to anybody, so we can't say who did it, but someone went in there and cleaned out their bank accounts. So they did track the hackers down. They knew where they were and they knew where they kept their money. And so those bank accounts have been cleaned out. And the IoT attacks right now, they're a novelty thing because the average teenager can, listen in on your Echo speaker or whatever. But they have the potential to be much worse. With IoT, you're taking small embedded operating systems and you're making money off of them. But often the people who are inventing these things or pushing these things out don't realize that embedded system comes with an FTP server that you didn't turn off or a telnet server that you didn't turn off. And so I'm glad that there's attention on that, but I expect IoT to be a problem for a while.
Yeah. Plus just the literally millions that are coming on the line every day. You know, I mean, it's really crazy. And I wanted to just speak a minute about from a standpoint of the like business vulnerability. And I pulled up a MITRE attack, and it's a type, you know, it's where they're tracking the way that the guys are working. It was just so massive. I couldn't even get it on a slide just to show people all the ways that the bad actors have plotted out and mapped out what they're doing. But ultimately, they have payloads, right? They're trying to drop something and they're trying to get it through on email to you, on a firewall, through a software vulnerability, or possibly even an infected website. But the designed payload delivery is to get something on your machine and put it on there, which is called an advanced persistent threat. And I'm going to let you just describe this next slide to me as we look at how the advanced persistent threat, kind of the timeline and the way the model that it works off of.
Yeah, so when we're talking about the APT or advanced persistent threat, you're talking about the top of the food chain as far as hackers go. Those are people like me who have been trained by government agencies, or like we said before, college educated guys who can get really down to the packet level and how things going. And what we're looking at here is what we call the kill chain. And so, you know, it's not like the movies where I sit down and 5 minutes later, I have all your passwords and I'm in your system. Anytime that we need to get into a network, you know, first thing we're going to do is it even worth getting into? If it's not, we'll move on to the next network. If you work at a bank, you're worth getting into. If you move a lot of cash, you're worth getting into. If you have a database that has a lot of proprietary information that's valuable, then you're worth getting into. So you become a target at that point. And so once you become a target, we actually just follow these steps one by one right up until we own your system. Now, this is a little bit of the traditional way, because what we're looking at right now, it doesn't count. So this is the traditional kill chain. The kill chain is actually expanded and is less a chain and more a tree, because we have more places we can attack now. If I get stuck along the kill chain and let's say enable persistence, I can't do anything there. Maybe I can get into your cloud system, your cloud email. And so I don't have to get onto your systems. I can go into your cloud system. Or if I can't get persistence on a computer, going back to your IoT devices, can I get persistence on a light bulb, which sounds silly, but those are the kinds of things we're looking at, or even a printer. People put printers on the network. Printers are just computers that print. And so they're capable of all kinds of things. And we don't really look at those as something that we need to protect. But yep. This is, if you're studying to be a hacker, this is lesson one, day one is what we're looking at right here. Everything else about learning to be a hacker is for each one of these bubbles, how do I do that? And when you get all the way to the end, then you're an expert and you're good at what you're doing.
Yep. So we'll talk about a little bit about the top threats and, you know, ransomware, and I put extortion because, you know, they're well beyond just ransoming. And I read a very interesting article. I don't know the author, but he was relating just some of the things that have happened throughout history where they were basically stealing people. You know, they were kidnapping people and demanding ransom. And this guy that wrote the article is a negotiator for the ransom, you know, to negotiate ransomware deals and stuff. And I'm sure, are you familiar with Chris Voss, Rudy?
I'm not, but I'm familiar with ransomware negotiators, so I'm familiar with the job.
He was he wrote books and stuff. He's kind of on the speaking circuit now, but he talked about how he was a hostage negotiator. Mm-hmm. And this guy uses really a lot of the same tactics that he did, but we're seeing this prolific rise in ransomware. And again, you said it, there's systems, there's countries out there that have smart people, they're syndicated, some of them are government backed, they have the ability to transfer Bitcoin into fiat money very easily. So the ecosystem is ripe for it, no extradition laws, so very little risk of getting caught. But let's talk about, and ransomware by definition is just where they encrypt your files, and in order to get the key, you can you're going to have to pay. But let's talk about extortion. Weigh in on that and see how you're seeing that.
Yeah, so the extortion level of this, and sometimes in some of my talks, I talk about the back and forth of cybersecurity. The bad guys do something, we figure out how to stop it. They figure out how to get around it, then we figure out how to stop that. And so this is just, the extortion is just an extension of ransomware after we figured out how to stop it. Originally with ransomware, it was easy to stop. You just do a backup. Well, all your files are encrypted. I'll just restore it from a backup. I'm not paying that ransomware. And so they made things more difficult. But what they're doing now is, in addition to encrypting the data on your servers, they're exfiltrating the data. So now it's more than just, I'll give you the key to unencrypt your stuff. They say, I'll restore from a backup. Okay, that's fine. Guess what? We have backups too of what we stole from you. Would you like your customer list out there on the internet? Would you like, all of your customers' private information out there on the internet? If you don't, then you're going to pay us this money. So the backup, even though it's still great for stopping a lot of your ransomware attacks, those more sophisticated attacks, the backup can't do that anymore. So now we have to continue the backups, but we also have to figure out, do I have data being exfiltrated by someone who's not authorized to exfiltrate it? And how can I stop that? And so, and that's already being addressed, and that's already being looked at. But they'll look for another way. Again, it's going to evolve, and it will be that way till the end of time. As long as there are bad guys, and as long as there are people who are willing to take your hard-earned money, then we'll be fighting this fight.
Yep. And of course, phishing email being a major component, a way to get in. Literally, we had I'll tell us a quick war story from yesterday. Local company got a phone call from their bank, and they were socially engineered, and they transferred $41,000 off of a phone call. I went to their computer, did that, got their IP address. And the reason we got called in is because got their IP address, and they started doing a denial of service attack on their IP address, trying to break in, trying to figure out a way to get into that company, I guess, just thinking, hey, we just got 41K, they got cash on hand. And then they start throwing all kind of tools at it, and we had to work with their internet service provider in order to, that's how we discovered they were getting hacked, and or attempted, they're getting a lot of traffic trying to exploit their router. And then we had a little further conversation and found that out that had happened earlier that morning. So that's the kind of stuff that is happening all the time. And for every one of those big attacks that we hear on the news, there's thousands of little attacks like this one that no one will ever hear about.
Yeah. Phishing is still the number one way. So if I'm doing red teaming exercises, which means I am trying to break into your network so I can tell you how I got into your network, the easiest way to get in is by phishing email. Cybersecurity equipment has gotten really good. So if it's configured right, you become a hard nut to crack. What's easier is sending somebody an email. And so that email, that phishing email, it becomes what I call the vampire attack. The old, 1940s vampire stories is, well, the vampire can't come into your house unless you invite him in. That phishing email is asking to be invited in. And so when somebody clicks on that link, the phishing email is just part A. Part B is what happens. What am I clicking on the link and losing credentials? Or am I clicking on the link and something's being placed in RAM? Or am I clicking on the link and I'm now activating malware? And so the phishing is actually just the way in for one of these other attacks. So we said earlier that, it's more of a tree than a chain now. So there's multiple things that phishing email could be. And so I have a different slide, much like this one, where, a lot of companies have, hey, this is our staff, and here's Mary, and this is all about her life, which unfortunately makes phishing email a lot easier. I have in my slide, tells, where she's worked at, her volunteer stuff. And then the phishing email just sounds like an old friend. And I've used enough from that background information to make it sound like I actually know this person. It's a woman. So I write it as if, I'm another woman trying to get in touch with an old friend. And then, hey, here's a picture from us back in the day. And I sign it Ann because it's an extremely common name. And so Ann could be anybody. They want to know who she is. They're going to click on that picture because she doesn't want to be caught off guard. Oh, Lord, I can't remember Ann. I don't want to be embarrassed. She clicks on the picture, and now I'm into the network. Yep. The social engineering itself that you talked about before the phishing, social engineering almost always relies on one thing. A social engineer never calls you and threatens you or bullies you into anything. They call you and they are a person in need of help, and you are their savior. And that's what they count on. You'll have a social engineer that is a woman. She needs something. Her husband's gone. She doesn't have access to it. And she's playing a recording of a crying baby in the background. And the person on the other side hears this crying baby. And here's this woman that's in distress. It's not a real baby, it's recording. But all they can think is, I need to help this lady. And so, not supposed to give access to the husband's account out, but that's what they do. So they're clever.
Very clever, exactly. And another thing that has really opened up the avenue is the remote workers. A lot of people, are in a lot of companies even. I don't think it'll stick for good forever, or as far as like complete remote working. That's personal thought. But Microsoft said that they're going to fully distributed workforce. I mean, and I know other companies that have, but remote workforce has absolutely enabled. Then I want to talk just for a second. I know you're going to be versed on this too. How the bad actors are, how they, some of the programs they write, they won't hit certain languages. Like if they're a Ukrainian company, if they discover that the computer has Ukrainian language, or whatever, they'll not encrypt it, or they'll not exploit it. And they're also, like they went for a while where they wouldn't hit hospitals right at the beginning of the pandemic. And so, and a lot of them, they want to have a good reputation as bad guys, and they will, they'll stand down if, in certain circumstances. Even some of these really high profile breaches, what I'm reading is that they're kind of backing away from those because it brings too much press.
Exactly. So we talked about the Colonial Pipeline earlier, and I had predicted on another panel before this happened that the government was not going to sit by about Colonial because that costs the nation too much money. It was more than just the cost of Colonial, but it was the disruption of traffic. It was the disruption of shipping within the United States. People couldn't get boxes. People were running out of gas, couldn't get to their medical appointments. So I didn't think that the government was going to let that one slide. And again, we don't know who did it, but somebody cleaned out the accounts. They have to, and so the language thing, yes. If I'm in a country that I could be extradited to, any country that when I land on that box, any of those languages on that box are the language of a country I could be extradited to, I'm not going to do that. So if I'm an American and I land on a box and it's in Canada, well, Canada can come and get me. I'm not going to hit that box. If I land on a box and it's in North Korea can't hit me. And so I go after that box. North Korea just doesn't have any money, so nobody go attack North Korea. But so, they're very safe as far as, remember we said what they're after is, no risk and total reward. And so as far as backing off, that's new, but it's necessary for them to keep doing business, and they want to keep doing business. And they really don't consider themselves criminals. They consider themselves, as silly as it sounds, as doing you a favor. This is my fee that I'm charging you for showing you that you had bad security. Yep. And so they don't see it as they've done something bad. They see it as, I've done you a service that you didn't ask for, and this is the amount of money that I'm charging you for it, which is ridiculous. I get it. It's like me, taking a sledgehammer, breaking into your house and saying, give me $20, but I'm not a thief. Yeah. And so, and the remote workers thing, I know we said, we don't think it's going to go permanent, but so what companies have found out is I don't have to pay an electric bill anymore. I don't have to have a food cafeteria open. So they're finding out that the amount of money that they've saved by having remote employees at home in the very large businesses is actually makes business sense now. And so on the small end, I don't see it happening at all. But on the large end, if they can get over the security issues, I could see that becoming bigger.
Yep, sure. And we touched on this a little bit as far as the Internet of Things. And, you were talking about that understanding that every one of these devices, it's doing something for us, but it's really a little mini computer and it has open ports and open vulnerabilities. And, that's one thing that I'm, always stress is the fact that, a man wrote it. A man wrote a piece of software. They wrote code. They asked and answered questions in this code. Well, there's going to be gaps in it that another man could find. And that's the cat and mouse that will go on forever. And one, just like a tip for people that are adding thermostats or adding cameras or doing things on their business network, you really need to put that on a separate network. Not on the business type network, even like allowing people to add their, put their personal cell phones on your internet that's connected to your database. Let's say it needs to go on a different wireless network.
Yeah, you can't have people's, and I talk about this a lot, you can't have people's personal devices where you have the crown jewels, because you're going to tell them, well, we got hacked and it was you. Well, you let them on there and it wasn't a company owned device. So they weren't required to have antivirus software. They weren't required to have any kind of protection at all. So they got something bad. They took it on your network, and there's not much you can do about that, because you allowed it. So I always tell folks, the bring your own device, the personally owned devices, they go straight to the internet. They have no access to anything internal. And then, we always get the question, well, we have to have personally owned devices and they have to have access. Can we do it safely? Yes, but it's more work and you have to be willing to do the work. And so a lot of folks just want it to be magic. I put a firewall in, I'm good. Remember what I said earlier, if we put these devices in and they're configured properly, they protect us. But we said earlier with phishing, we're relying on the human error. Well, configuring a device is also human error.
Yeah.
And so it has to be configured the right way.
That's right. And we talked a little bit about insider threats. That's a major problem, as well as I class shadow IT because, I work in a small to mid-sized space and,
it's
shadow
absolutely
IT.
an insider threat. I have a story about shadow IT that brought an entire network down if we want to go into it.
If it's less than 2 minutes, go ahead.
Well, so shadow IT is basically when someone who's not part of the IT department puts their own IT in there. But these people aren't smart enough to know what the complications of that are. And so this person put a device in that had the same IP address as the gateway to the entire network. And he was on the back end of the network. So now computers are sending traffic to the gateway and to the other end of the network at the same time, and the traffic's not getting out. That's your shadow IT being a big insider threat.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And I tell you, I'm putting something else in there that I was reading some Gartner reports. What I guess I felt, what's the word? Smart, but a better word than smart is affirmed in my thinking after 20 years of doing this. And I was looking up actually for this presentation. And one of the things that I'm finding is that IT teams are very stressed. They're just like everybody else. We threw the pandemic on, go configuring all those devices to work from home, all the things going on. And every company, I've said for a long time, if I could slow down 20%, I'd gain probably 40% of effectiveness. And this is something that Gartner, which is a major, data collector and a real voice in the IT space. So this is the voice that you would almost say as far as the authority. 99% of vulnerabilities exploited by the end of 2020 will be continue to be ones known by security and IT professionals at the time of the incident. And what I'm saying is that the we talk a lot about 0-day threats and threats that have come out. There's not a fix for them. There's not a patch for them. They are 0.4% of the risk right now. It's something that simply an IT guy or security professional, they didn't patch the server.
Yeah.
I'm getting information. I don't know what you're getting. I don't think they really that I know of, but I hear that this possibly came from the champion breach was from a patch that went on it that didn't go on an Exchange server. Have you heard anything like that?
I haven't heard of that specific incident, but not patching something and then getting had is very common.
Yeah,
And the sad thing is, it's been common since the 90s. And you
yeah,
can go back to the 1990s and read about, you can read cybersecurity articles from the 1990s. And that's why we had the Microsoft started automatically patching computers. They didn't ask you. It was because of all of those things. But
yeah,
every device doesn't automatically patch, and especially with professional grade devices, you can't automatically patch because the manufacturer doesn't know how you're using that device. And if this patch is going to bring your network down, so they wait on you to make that intelligent decision. But an IT shop where a guy's wearing 7 different hats usually tends to think, well, if it's running and nobody's complaining, I'm going to leave it alone because I have other things to work on. It's in one way you can say it's not the guy's fault, he's doing the best he can, but in another way you kind of have to prioritize what you're doing. You can't go fix a printer at the expense of your network being vulnerable.
yeah. Another thing that we've done here at a long time at our company is we use it's kind of like Myers-Briggs. People have heard of that term, but we use DISC, and it's dominance,
Mhm.
influence, steadiness, and compliance. And it's a behavioral profile of people. And when you look at technicians, and I've done many of them through the years, and
Mhm.
almost every one of them are very steady and very compliant. And
Mhm.
what it looks like in real life is the fact that they don't like change. They will follow the rules, but they're not going to go out and look for new rules and new things. And basically, if it ain't broke, don't take a
Mhm.
risk of fixing it. Is very much a mindset on most technical minds in the IT world. And I know that. And again, that's kind of my self revelation that's being affirmed by the smart guys, which I like that. And Craig Lawson, I wrote this. He's the vice president of research at Gartner. It's really, we're thinking that we're always looking for a great white shark to jump up and get us, but really it's the mosquito. And
Mhm.
you
The
know,
slow bites.
yeah, it's the little thing that got you infected. Um, you
It's the
know,
kill chain. It's
yeah,
it's a step-by-step process.
really fascinating. And that's damning on our industry to a large degree, because as I look at this, it's really these bad actors are good at getting I liken it to like people that break into cars in
Mhm.
neighborhoods. Really all they did was open the door and it wasn't locked, and there was valuables in there. Now,
Yeah.
of course, there's much more sophisticated ways of doing it, but a lot of times they're able to check a lot of doors on cars across the globe in real fast time and find out which ones are unlocked, and then they're able to exploit. Because when I look at most of these breaches, whenever they're revealed what the root cause was, it is very preventable.
Yeah. And one
And
thing I want to add that I frequently do when I'm talking to management, because this is important for management to know, and that is the reason that your IT people don't, if it's broke, don't fix it, or I could upgrade to the newest thing, but it might bring the network down and I'm scared to, is because management says the network can never go down. And if it does, you're in trouble and we're going to write you up. And IT can be an unpredictable business because we all know that the drivers are different, the software is different. You can do everything right and it result in something that happens in an unintended way. And management has to be mature enough to say that I'm going to allow my IT department, in the progress of making my network better and more secure, I understand that they're going to do that in good faith and due diligence, and we won't have an outage unless it's something unforeseen. But you can't punish people for trying to give you better security, and you go down for a little while. And that's something else I've seen is, we know we could do this, but we have to be down for 4 hours, and they said we can't be down. Well, then
yep.
how are you ever going to get better security?
That's right. So it's really, yeah, you're right. This is another thing that actually pertains very much to what we're going to talk about here in a second, is with firewalls. Again, this is Gartner data, real deal stuff. 99%, this is their prediction up till 2023, 99% of firewall breaches will be caused by security misconfigurations. Basically, the guy misconfiguring it. And with COVID-19, that increased workload again, exhausted IT teams stretched thin, and human errors being a big root cause of this. So something definitely very eye-opening. I'm gonna
Mhm.
in about a month, I'm gonna release some information because this has been on my mind and on my heart for a long time. I've seen it, and
I see it in every IT shop.
yeah, to try to how to do that. I'm gonna talk just briefly on it, but later I'm gonna have a big reveal. But let's kind of move into the how do we stop this? How do we protect our business? And one is, of course, the human element, training. And Rudy, we give away to our managed clients, we give away free cybersecurity training, and I
Hmm.
bet 10% of them take it.
Yeah, and that's uh, I don't know any place that I've worked where I've been in charge. It's mandatory, and you must
Yes.
do it every 6 months.
Yep.
Now, I know that some organizations, like with HIPAA, they require it every year. But here's my deal with HIPAA: it's like let's pick a month. We do it in October. Then we hire somebody in January. So from January till the next October, he's not going to get it. And so and that training goes a long way. Something that when I'm working with folks, invariably I have yet to have anybody come back and tell me that this hasn't happened the way that I said. Go to a random employee in your organization and ask them, if you think that you have a cybersecurity event, what are you supposed to do? Nobody's able to answer that question.
Yep.
Do they pull the LAN cable out? Do they leave it in? Do they cut the computer off? Do they leave it turned on? What phone number do they call? Do I call the IT shop first, or do I call my boss first? You can't answer any of these questions. And if you move up the ladder to the IT shop, do you have a company that's going to help you with this breach, or do you have an internal forensics team, or are you not going to do forensics? Um, if you find out you have ransomware, how are you going to keep that from spreading to other machines? Do you have a process in place to, cut the connection to your domain controller, your exchange server, whatever? And people don't have these things, and that's all training, and
And
that all can be
it's
fixed.
not that hard. It's
Right.
not, it's something you could write down in a
You just got to
meeting
do it
with
ahead of time.
somebody. That's right. You could write it down and say, okay. And a mediocre plan executed well is much better than no
No
plan at
plan at
all.
all.
Yeah. But here's another one is perform timely network assessments. And I didn't put on a particular schedule because some people probably need to be doing a review on their network every 30 days. Some people could get by maybe quarterly or 6 months or something. But, I call it well baby checkups.
Hmm. Yeah. So when I was in the data center, actually as a manager, we had daily, weekly, monthly, and so we had some things that we looked at every day, some things every week, some things once a month. But it has to be done, and I am just as guilty. So there's no mistake made by administrator, and they think I'm the only guy that's ever done that. Believe me, I have made every mistake you can make. So I have open ports, and then it's like this port's not supposed to be open, but to troubleshoot this issue, I've got to open this port and forget to turn it back on, or forget to
Yeah.
turn a firewall back on. And without that assessment, going back through and looking, that doesn't get caught. If we don't go and do that assessment, that port that I left open, and let's say it's SSH, which is a terrible port to leave open, but I left it open, we never do that assessment, and it's open for years to be abused.
Yes, that's right. I tell you, you're making my case for me. Another thing is old, outdated technology. Um, they just not only do they break more and they cause more in downtime, but they also come with a lot of vulnerabilities because I always use the analogy of like attorneys. You somebody told me one time you can hire a $200 an hour attorney basically to get you out of a problem, and a $400 attorney can get you right back in it. And you got one man that wrote the software, and another man could find an exploit in it. Is my point.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just said. You got to have an asset management program. Another thing is cyber liability insurance, and
Mhm.
the particular client I'm speaking of, no, to protect the guilty. Of course, I would never divulge anything, but they didn't have it,
Yeah.
and they're out 40K minimum.
Mhm.
Um, and plus the downtime they experienced, and that's just it. And the cool thing, you touched on it, Rudy, a minute ago, is that whenever you have the proper cyber liability insurance policy, they come with a team of
Mhm.
experts that can do the forensics, and forensics are so important because they can tell whether you had a security incident or a security breach, and if you had a breach, how many records were breached, and basically, their job and why they have this crack team of professionals, attorneys, negotiators, Bitcoin people, public relations people, is because ultimately their job is to mitigate their risk that they have purchased or sold. You've sold your risk to them by buying that insurance.
Mhm.
And it's so important. There's one phone number, and guys, we got to have that, and we got to have that number programmed in your phone. So when something happens, you can push that button and activate that process.
Yeah, the Pokemon Institute estimates that it's $3.5 million to recover from a cyber breach. And
Yeah.
that's not money that you can put towards inventory. It's not money that you can put towards payroll. That's money to recover from a cyber breach. So if you don't have that kind of money just sitting around not doing anything, then cyber insurance is probably something that you should think of and something that's important.
Yeah, 100%. Um, then we'll talk just briefly about protecting remote employees. What are some things that you have seen?
So with remote employees, it comes down to risk assessment and access because if they're remote, they can't and should not have access to everything behind the corporate firewall. They need to be sectioned off. Even me at SonicWall, I can't go back to the Active Directory domain controller from my house. So limit access as much as possible to only what I need access to get my job done. And then what is the risk? If it's low risk, then yeah, let them have a VPN and be done with it. If it's high risk, and I was a high risk employee at one time, so when I was, they put and that's kind of how I learned about Sonic Walls. They put a Sonic Wall firewall at my house so that when I needed to dial into work, that was how I got in. And so a lot of companies, especially with your executives and things like that, they're getting smaller industrial sized firewalls that are able to do a VPN connection back to work, and that's how they're connecting because folks know executives are always a target.
Yeah.
So it just depends on what's going on and how you want to do it. I'm always a fan of two-factor authentication. When I am attacking a network, I will tell you two-factor authentication makes it so much harder to get in. It's not impossible, but when you use two-factor authentication, if without two-factor authentication as a hacker, I need to be this smart. When you turn on two-factor authentication, I need to be smarter. And
Yep.
so, and hackers are like a pyramid. The smarter your hackers are, it gets smaller at the top.
All right. And there's a lot to be said on the remote workers, and but I want to fire up this next poll real quick because I'm wondering how many people on this call have cyber liability insurance. Um, just let's get that real quick. Basically, do you have cyber liability insurance? And I'm working on it. I'm getting it. I actually, this is like what is this? This is the third part in a 5-part series. The last part, I'm going to reveal what I kind of sneaked in there a few minutes ago, some things that we're doing. But the first part was humans, HR, getting documents in place, onboarding your people right, And
Mhm.
second part is I had a guy with doing cyber liability insurance. So I've got resources for you guys that, again, I'm not making money off these things. I just want to help our community and our
Yeah.
world. We got to quit letting these guys just totally ravage us. But yeah, really, 33% have it, two don't, one doesn't know, and some are planning on getting it. And when my offer has a part of that in in there at the end of this thing. So you're going to want to stay on board for that, because it's important to get the right policy for sure. And I've got people that are really good at that can help us. Okay. This next thing is something that I think is really the part. We got to have really a layered IT security approach. You got to have a human layer, the perimeter layer, the network security layer, endpoints where all the action happens in today's world. That's where, when you're working from home, if you're not protected, that device that they're connecting is not hardened, you're really at risk. You got to patch, you got to have application security, you got to have your data. I class that as security, and then how quick you can recover if something were to happen. And then, understanding where your data lives, your mission critical assets are, so that you're able to respond correctly.
Crown jewels.
What's that? Yeah,
Crown
crown
jewels.
jewels. I like that. I might steal that from you, Rudy. I really might.
I stole it from somebody else.
Oh yeah, it's great. And then I added this last one is from where we have been recently, and a zero trust review process. And that is may give a little bit of an indication as to what some of my secrets might be that I'm going to reveal a little bit later. And what that means is that you've got to have somebody else auditing your IT guys. And because here's the deal, they're good guys, they're not bad guys. Hell, I got them. I understand them. I've been around them for 20 years. They're going to be mainly, it ain't broke, don't fix it, don't make no waves, do my job, all that kind of guys. So they're great guys. And again, you got to then have the relationship with the owner that says, listen, a lot of times I hear IT guys and they're like, hey, yeah, I told them, but they won't listen to me. So that cuts against management. They got to listen, but you've got to have a review process that is looking at what's going on, because we're seeing, Gartner's my proof is that we're seeing that IT departments are stretched thin. They're not making the greatest decisions. They're rushed. They're hurried, and they're not following through. So
if you want it bad, you'll get it bad. If you want it really bad, then you'll get it really bad.
yeah, and so let's talk about just specifically. We talked about that, how the bad guys are getting through us, and this is just one way. But again, we got a firewall guy on board with us. So talking about secure socket layer and the TLS and how that's going on with the firewalls, and how actually the bad actors are exploiting by infecting websites and getting all the way to the desktop. You take that up for me.
So this is what I talked about, the red team work that I did. This was, I put everything through SSL. I encrypted all of the command and control traffic between my command and control server and your endpoint machine. The reason doing that is all of your sensors now are blind. Your firewall is blind. Everything between that computer, which is the only thing exists that has a certificate that can decrypt my traffic, and my command and control server. So the only place that I can get caught on that in that scenario is the endpoint machine. So if I encrypt my malware, I'm depending on my antivirus, and that's it. I will tell you that as an attacker, if I can get onto your machine and your antivirus doesn't catch me right away, the first thing that I do when I get onto that machine is I break your antivirus. Everything in a computer works off DLLs or something like that. So I can go and delete one, change one, play with it. And then it tells you, yes, I've updated my database and we have all the latest signatures and you're fine and there's nothing there. And it hasn't updated the database in 3 weeks because it doesn't know that it can't update its database.
Yep.
And then, just like you said, I try to get persistence because I want to be able to get back into this computer. And guess what? Again, there's no antivirus to stop me because the one security product that could have caught me, I've disabled. So you have to inspect that encrypted traffic. You have to inspect it at the firewall. So it gets decrypted at the firewall, it gets inspected, and then it gets re-encrypted and sent on to the client. Now, here's the caveat. Is it going to slow my network down? Yes, because what did I say? We are at the airport. TSA is saying, we're not checking any bags today. Go on through. We're not going to have any long lines. Okay, but 70% of your internet traffic is encrypted. So when you turn that SSL on, we're now inspecting 70% more traffic. And so you have to understand, is it necessary? It's absolutely necessary. Am I going to suffer some kind of network slowdown? Yes, because you've just been passing packets. And so there's a trade-off, but in my mind, you can't not do this. You have to accommodate for it. And we can accommodate for speed. But you have to get with somebody like Phillip, and he's got to tell you that this firewall that you have, if we turn on DPSSL, is not going to support your network. So let's look at this other firewall. And so, but as far as not doing it, which unfortunately most folks don't, it's just crazy to me.
Yeah. The thing that really brought that to attention, I was reading a particular breach that happened, and then I linked to an article that was talking about how the bad actors are basically, if you were to think about it, they're hiding cocaine in a coffee canister, and they're not doing X-rays. Is the way I like to think of it. They're smuggling cocaine in, and basically that's where they're able to, when you go say to a website or you go to a download link or something, they're able to pass that traffic through TSA. And it's all the way to the desktop. And you said
just a black
earlier
box. They don't know what's in it.
about Anna. Yeah, they have no clue what's in it. They're just trusting. I mean, it's just blind trust. And there is 70% of machines that were infected with antivirus. This is a very recent report, had active, up-to-date antivirus that were infected with ransomware, had active, up-to-date antivirus. Antivirus is not enough to stop most of this stuff. And if they can pass it straight through the firewall, you are really in trouble. And most of the traffic, and soon, I mean, that statistic's going up and up and up. Soon, most 95% of traffic will be encrypted.
I'm certain it already is, but I just don't have a piece of paper proving it.
Yeah, that's right. Because, you go to it, and we just did a marketing. We switched over to HubSpot, and we sent out an email, and we didn't have a certificate on the subdomain, like a wildcard certificate. Immediately, I had people calling me, "Hey, you're sending out something that doesn't have HTTPS, and there's a warning on my browser." So, yeah, I mean, we're trained, and people are not going to go to unsecure sites anymore, because that's a big red flag. So that's something big. And I want to kind of take us into this next thing, and it goes into really my belief system on where we need to be. Now, this is going to be in relation to firewalls, Rudy, and I want to talk about some of the things, primarily the zero touch configuration, the templates, if you will, that SonicWall has a product. It's called Network Management System. Is it system? Yeah. Okay. We call it NMS, so I don't even know what the acronym is anymore. But basically, it is a single pane of glass. But what I love about it is that you can I'm trying to protect my company from my guys making mistakes. Because when we look at firewalls, we look at the exploitation. We got Gartner data that says of the ones that are going to get breached in between now and even 2023, they're saying 99% of them are because an IT guy didn't configure them right. So I'm sitting there going, how in the world am I going to protect my clients from us? So, and one way to do this is that you set up a template that is approved. Like, we'll work with the SonicWall engineers on it to make sure that it is right on with what we're trying to do. Then we apply that template to all of the devices. And what I love about it is, you're going to tell me a lot more about it, but what I love about it is that if that firewall has any type of change, it puts it into a bucket showing that it got changed. I love that. That's like change management. Everybody wants change management. It's very difficult to accomplish. This system does it automatically.
Yeah, that's the auditing. We don't have it. Who changed this? And then nobody did. We can go back and say, no, we see it. It's right here. I did it. Sorry. So and so you threw me off for a second with NMS. So it's actually should be NSM, so Network Security Manager. And here's what's funny about that is I often call it NMS, and I don't know why. And so when you had it up there, it didn't register because I make that mistake frequently. So let me talk you through the process of how it can work. So as an IT shop, I need to send something over there. It's 20 miles away. Who knows? We'll say it's 200 miles away. So I don't, the old way is I'd ship it to the IT shop. I'd do all the configuration on it, and then I'd ship it out to the organization. Today, we just ship it straight to the organization. They plug power into the wall. They plug the internet cable into the firewall. Once it contacts SonicWall and says, hey, here's my serial number. So NSM says, oh yeah, we already have a configuration for you. It's in this template, which is the same as 70 other firewalls in your organization that are at small boutique shops or whatever. So your VPN connection back to HQ is already in, and guess what? We don't have to worry about the guy when he was configuring it. He fat fingered it because it's in the template. So
Yep.
we're not going to see that error. We're not going to see that he forgot to turn off services because it's in the template. Once that template downloads, you've got your VPNs configured. You've got your username and passwords configured. If you have special groups, like administrators get access to these things, secretaries get access to these things, mechanics only get access to this set of tools, then that gets pushed down. And so all of those hours, again, we said 70 firewalls. Do you want to configure 70 firewalls one by one? So this template does all of that. And you can still go by and make minor changes that don't match the template that's in there. And we understand that that might have to happen. We may have one boutique that has this new computerized mirror that nobody else has, and we might have to do something special with that. So the template's there, but you don't have to drive 200 miles. You don't have to have it shipped to you first. You can log into it and start working on it right away. You actually don't have to log into it. You can log into NSM and you can make all your changes from there. So you don't have to worry about, well, if I log into the firewall and do anything, am I affecting users on the other end? Because you make those changes in NSM and then NSM will push them down. Once they're in there, and that's just the setting up of the configuration of it. Once they're in there, then you get the page that we see here. And so with an active model, if you are all across the United States, you'll actually see little dots everywhere where you have your firewalls. And then these at the top where we see summary network threats and that, this particular screen is your entire network. And so if I'm a business with 100 firewalls out there, I'll see a summary of what kind of traffic is going through all of my firewalls. What kind of threats are all of my firewalls seeing? And then on the left-hand side where it says firewalls, once we click on that, we can actually go down and look at the individual firewalls. So remember what I said before, I have this new cool computerized mirror, but I just need to make this change on a single firewall. So I'll click on that firewalls, I'll find that one firewall, and then I'll just go make the changes there. Yeah. The menu doesn't change much on the individual firewall from what you see here. As far as the basic dashboard. What you won't get here that you will get with the individual firewalls is you'll get some things and some reports that only apply to a single firewall. But anything that you can push out across devices, for instance, one of the things that we can't do is we can't make everybody's gateway the same. So that's not going to be part of the template, and that's not something that you're going to push out to all devices. Sure. But we can take a single rule and say we're not going to allow peer-to-peer traffic anywhere and push that out to all devices. Yep. And then the last thing that I would say is just the actual the tracking of rules is much better here. In other words, I blocked that traffic and I don't understand why it's not being blocked. We can look and see, is that rule being shadowed by another rule? Well, it's not being blocked here because, 5 lines up, you permitted the traffic. And since it was permitted, it stopped processing and it went on to the next packet. So in NSM, I was going to say NMS again, NSM makes the process of finding out where those conflicts are easier.
That's right. And for us, it allows us to have another set of eyes to be able to manage this and get alerts off of it, as well as to be able to do those well baby checkups, making sure that everything's running right. And if something gets changed, we get an alert. And we're calling it NMS and because of the previous product was called GMS.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, that's the reason. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that's where I got it from. Ever since it's come out, I've called it NMS, and I don't know why. So that may be it.
Yeah,
I have to go back every once in a while and correct myself.
Yeah. But anyway,
And
that's
those
a
reports
major
are
feature. Yeah.
so those things that you're asking about, the statistics and everything, they can be turned into reports that can be printed out, and it's something that you can print out and show the boss, hey, this is the good that we did this week as an IT department.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So, well, cool. Well, that's kind of what I wanted to accomplish. We have a special offer from us that we're going to do a free cybersecurity risk assessment, and we're going to look at a firewall baseline assessment, do a network security review of the network, look over your governance documents that you have in place, as well
Please
as
do
do a
those.
disaster recovery business continuity audit
Mhm.
and a cyber liability insurance assessment for anyone that's on the call. And what would you charge me to do that, Rudy? That's
So I will tell you that SonicWall does something like that, but you go way more into it than we do. Um, but yeah, so
hint.
I can tell you that if I priced it out by hour, I couldn't afford it.
Yeah, it's a bunch of work, but I'm telling you, I think that you have to take a comprehensive look. It goes into the part of what we're doing, even with this series that we're doing, is you can't. There's not a one shoe fits all. Again,
Mhm.
we want to work off standards and we want to standardize the defense in depth, but still, there's going to be different governance policies for for different industries and based on compliance and everything. But it's really, I think, a very, very robust offer, and it's for folks on the call. And all we ask is that you would hit us up uh, before the 11th. I don't want to keep it open too long because I got to do a lot of that work. My team does. So, but if you want to take us up on that, if you have more questions for Rudy or myself, you can just hit events@askbis.com. And I don't see any questions right now. We'll see if anybody has questions. Um, they can put it in the chat real quick if there's any questions out there. Not any. While we're waiting on that, Rudy, any closing comments or thoughts or anything that
So
you'd like to add?
so the one thing that as far as cybersecurity, a lot of folks are in a bad spot, and here's why. Cybersecurity is not systems administration, and a technology degree is not a cybersecurity degree. You look at the classes, and they're different. And so a lot of information technology managers are being asked to do the cybersecurity. It's gonna be hard to do it on your own. And so going back to my background, remember that I spent 25 years in the data center before I ever went over to cybersecurity. And so I thought with 25 years experience under my belt, I'm going to go into cybersecurity and it's going to be awesome. It'll be easy. It was not. The skills are not the same, even though the tools are. And so to ask your systems admin department to take charge of cybersecurity, it's asking a police officer to show up at a fire and put out the fire. It's asking an ambulance to show up at a crime scene and stop the bad guys. They look a lot alike. They have a lot of the same gear, but it's not the same job. They don't have the same education. And so you really have to, if you don't have the ability to do it yourself, you really got to ask around and get something from the experts, because trying to do it on your own without the education is not going to work out well for you.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, I got a thank you, but no questions. So we're gonna, want to really respect folks' time. I appreciate everybody joining us today. There will be recordings of this that'll go out. I had a lot of people ask for recordings, and we're happy. We're here to help, and I appreciate your time, Rudy. I really appreciate you jumping on. I think you're even on vacation, aren't you?
Well, no, I'm not on vacation, but I am out of office this week because I'm seeing customers. So you may have gotten an email saying that I wasn't in, but I wish I was on vacation.
Cool. All right, man. Well, that sounds great. And we appreciate everybody and stay in touch. The next webinar in this series is going to be about disaster recovery, business continuity. And the question for you guys is my whole network went down. How long before I'm back in production? That's the question I want to answer on the next webinar. And then the final one, we're going to do a lunch and learn, a physical in-house lunch and learn again. Yay! It's going to be over at on the Causeway, and I'm going to be launching a new division / company that I'm really excited about. That's going to answer a lot of the questions that we posed here today. So appreciate it, and y'all have a great week. It's almost over, guys. Hang in there.
Thanks, folks.